This is Lisa from Mobile Tech Review, and this is the Asus Zephyrus S, say that without lisping, GX531GX. Symmetrical name. So this is the successor to the GX501. It's a thin and light 15-inch gaming laptop with NVIDIA RTX graphics inside. So this is meant to be a very high-end laptop with a price that competes with a really nicely appointed Razer Blade 15 Advanced, for example. $2,999 for our top-of-the-line model with an NVIDIA RTX 2080 Max-Q graphics card and the usual Intel 8th Gen Core i7-8750H CPU. Has anything improved since the last generation? What's new? We're going to look at it now. So for those of you who are having extreme sticker shock at the $3,000 price tag, take note that there is an RTX 2070 Max-Q model that's $2,199, which is a little bit less terrifying for a price and a better deal. The rest of the specs are the same. The full HD 144Hz display, the 512 gig NVMe M.2 SSD, X2, not X4, so it's a middling Intel 660p SSD in there, regardless of whether you get the $2,000 or the $3,000 model. You have Intel Wi-Fi inside, 9560 AC, so that's good stuff. And a zone backlit keyboard. That's a little weird here. I mean, that seems like 2 years ago, right? Usually premium gaming laptops have perky RGB backlighting, but you do get the neat ground effect lighting where the bottom drops down on this because they're retaining the same design from last year. You get colored LEDs there that you can set the color of. Our review loaner was provided by Computer Upgrade King, cuckusa.com, and if you buy from them, they can customize the RAM and the SSDs for you if you like. Oddly, no Thunderbolt 3 at this price point. I was kind of shocked. It does have two USB-C ports. One is Gen 1, one is Gen 2. It has a mix of USB-A 3.1 and 2.0 ports, a little shocking. HDMI 2.0B, that's nice to have. But given the fact there's no SD card slots, there's no display port, so you might have to find adapters from USB-C to DisplayPort. You might want to use a Thunderbolt dock. You can at least use a USB-C dock, though. The display on this is your typical gaming premium laptop display. It's full HD, 144Hz, claimed 3 millisecond response time. There's no PWM, pulse width modulation, flashy screen. And there's, on our unit, just about no black backlight bleed, which is a good thing. It has a Pantone validated sticker, which I think is more marketing than anything else. What does that exactly mean, right? But from the display metrics that you can see on screen, the metrics are actually pretty good. Now in the box, the calibration isn't that bad. So for those of you who want to use this for pro apps, for photo editing, for video editing, that's a good thing. Calibrating it is always the best thing to do, but it's fairly good. Brightness, it's 265 nits, not super impressive. The build on this is good. It's got a magnesium alloy frame and a metal casing, and it feels pretty strong and pretty rigid. So for those of you who find some MSI laptops a little too flexy, you're going to like that. Does this look as beautiful as the Razer Blade 15? Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but I think that the Razer Blade still has that black MacBook look of real quality there, but this one is pretty darn good. The drop-down design, I am just not really a fan of that. First, it was like, gee whiz, it's something new. You don't see novel designs in laptops very often. It does allow for a little bit more airflow at the bottom because they're not trusting you to behave yourself. They know you're going to try to put this on the bed instead of on a laptop cooler. In that respect, it is good. Does it make a huge difference? I don't know. Is it flimsy and does it break? No, it's pretty sturdy, so it's okay. The bad news is the same as the last Gen 1 and the current Gen 17-inch model is the keyboard is shifted all the way to the front also as part of their novel design. They did this last year. Even Acer did this one on the Triton models to try to leave more room for cooling in the top area, and also that keeps the heat away from you, so your fingers don't get too hot. I mean, surface temperatures at the keyboard typically 30s, maybe to low 40s centigrade, so you're not talking way over human body temperature. But unless you have a nice roomy desk to put this on, it's not the most comfortable thing to type on because you don't have a wrist rest area. It only has 1.2 millimeters of key travel. For this sort of laptop that people are probably going to be buying to use for business or school, that sort of thing, because you can take it anywhere, it doesn't have the greatest tactile feel. It's not horrible, but it's just kind of short travel, and you will notice it. And then there's the trackpad that's been shifted off to the right. It's a Microsoft Precision trackpad. That part's good, but it's very narrow because they didn't want to make a very wide-body laptop to fit it in, so you don't have much room to use it, and if you're left-handed like me, it's a total loss. I also did notice that the top area of the trackpad would miss taps if you're doing the tap to click like I often do. It's much better towards the bottom area, a little bit annoying then. The speakers on this has two 2-watt stereo speakers with a smart amp, whatever that means. They're really, really good for a 15-inch thin and light laptop. I was surprised. I almost thought there was a subwoofer in there because it has good bass. Usually these thin and light laptops don't. Really, really loud. I mean, you put it down to 40% volume and you can still annoy people with the volume that these speakers put out, but nice and full. So yeah, you don't feel like you need to use headphones. And what about heat and fan noise? Because those kind of go hand in hand, don't they? You can still hear the speakers even when playing games because the fans on this are really well tuned. They did do a good job with that. 250 fins per fan. They move air, you'll hear them, but it's not bellowing. It's not filling the room. It's not screeching. It's not annoying. Well done there, ASUS. You always will hear the fans though when it's plugged in. If you unplug it or if you put it on silent mode, then you won't. But when it's plugged in, they're running at a low volume, but you'll always hear that whoosh of air happening. How effective is the cooling system? Considering that we have an RTX 2080 Max-Q inside of here and a Core i7 6-core CPU, it's pretty effective. Does it run a whole lot cooler than a Razer Blade 15 or an MSI GS65 Stealth Thin? Not so much. It's just another way of tackling the problem, this thermal design. I don't see it as actually being super more effective. Core temperatures on this when you're gaming will be in the upper 90s and you will see thermal throttling. You will want to undervolt this, and if you're spending enough money on a gaming laptop, you probably are an enthusiast and you know what that means. Drop the CPU voltage a little bit and you can drop 5 degrees centigrade off of those core temperatures, which is a good idea. The GPU, obviously we have the RTX 2080 Max-Q. That's going to be the toastiest. That's a 90-watt version, by the way, of that GPU. And temperatures there are around 80, 81 when gaming on ultra settings and full HD resolution. So not bad. Sometimes we see a little bit lower, like 75. But given what we have crammed in here, that's not so bad. Yes, it is the Max-Q version. There are 3 versions of this, the RTX 2070 Max-Q, the RTX 2080 Max-Q, and an RTX 2060 Full Edition, which I haven't actually seen on the market yet for sale in real life. But RTX Max-Q graphics, typically about 20% lower performance. So if you have an RTX 2080 Max-Q, you'll get about 20% lower performance or 15% lower performance versus a regular RTX 2080. Of course, you're just not going to find a regular RTX 2080 in this thin and light design, are you? You have to move up a little bit, like the MSI GE Raider series, for example. A little bit thicker, a little bit more room for cooling. You get the idea. Still excellent performance. Every game that you're seeing that we demoed was done on ultra settings and no custom tuning other than to turn off VSync to make sure that we saw actual high frame rates available. This does have NVIDIA Optimus switchable graphics, so it can switch to Intel UHD 630 graphics when you're doing just productivity stuff or streaming video to save you some battery. That's a good thing because a 60 watt-hour battery is something we expect to see more in an Ultrabook and not in a gaming laptop. As you might guess, battery life, not so awesome on this. I've been averaging about 4.5 hours doing mixed productivity, streaming video, a little bit of Photoshop, brightness set to around 40%, which is about 150 nits or so. So yeah, it's not an Energizer Bunny, not even close. It has a 230 watt power brick, which is typical for laptops of this spec with a Max-Q GPU inside. So at least that's, relatively speaking, as gaming laptops go, somewhat portable. So for benchmarks, it benchmarks just as we expect it would, and very much like its competitors, a little bit higher, sometimes a little bit lower than, say, an MSI GS65 Stealth Thin. Typically, Razer gets the most performance out. They really do some good tuning, so their numbers are a little bit higher there. Opening this up is a real pain in the booty, let me tell you. So you take off first the drop-down piece, metal. That's pretty easy. Phillips head screws, 2 on each corner. They actually designed that so once you unscrew it, you can lift it off. It's got a cam hinge that mounts it because, you know, dust bunnies happen. They want you to be able to clean that out. So once you see the bottom, there's going to be a mix of Torx T5 and Phillips head screws that you're going to have to unscrew and then raise basically the top the keyboard deck off. Now you're going to remove all the Phillips head screws, but not the really teeny tiny ones that hold the fan on. So, but all the others you're going to unscrew. But then you're going to have to remove the hinge cover from the rear. 4 screws down here are what secure it, and then you're going to pry that off with a guitar pick or whatever because it holds on over here. It holds this top deck on a bit. So you have to pry that off first, this right here, because it's holding it down. So with a guitar pick, you gently pry this rear hinge cover off. Be mindful of the fact there are wires over here that connect to the LED indicators that are there. So get that off, but be real careful. You don't really have to completely detach it or anything like that. It's just what rests on top of your keyboard deck area that you're lifting off. All right, we're almost there. You're still with me, or have you just run away in horror? So now we can lift this up, but there are giant ribbon cables, so be really careful when you do this. And you can turn it over. Here's the battery right here, our 60 watt-hour battery. This is the M.2 SSD slot right here. And as we flip this over carefully, again, see, ribbon cable, ribbon cable, ribbon cable. Here's our single RAM slot. Remember, there's 8 gigs soldered on board, so you only have 1 RAM slot, which is kind of unfortunate for a gaming laptop. Our fans, with their 250 fins apiece, and they do a job pretty well. And there you have it. So yeah, you get the idea. If you want to repaste this, you can do that. You can unscrew the fans and the heatsink and repaste it. At this point, that's not so traumatic compared to actually getting into the laptop. And the Wi-Fi card is right here, and it is soldered on board. Unlike most laptops, well, most gaming laptops particularly, that do have a socketed Wi-Fi card. It's a good Intel 9560 AC card, so no problem there. That's a good enough card. Now that I've given ASUS a hard time for the disassembly of this, I have to say everything does come apart and go together very well and in a logical way. It's just kind of an unusual way to do things. It might not be any worse, and it might actually be better than what MSI does with the Stealth Fin line, where you have to flip the motherboard over to get to some components or to repaste it. At least you don't have to do that here, and you don't really have to detach any ribbon cables. You can just carefully set the lid aside, unlike the MSI. And it could still be better, of course. There's the 15-inch Razer Blade and Razer Blade Advance, or there's ASUS's own Rogue Strix line that come apart in a much more easy and traditional kind of way. So that's the ASUS Rogue Zephyrus S GX531GX. What a name. And what a price tag too, right? For the pros, it's got solid build quality. It looks quite nice. It doesn't creak. It doesn't feel too flexy. So for those of you who find an MSI Stealth Fin still a little too flexy or something like that, yeah. But is it as good as a Razer Blade 15 Advanced or regular? I don't know. That's a tough act to follow. The display on this is pleasing. It's fairly well calibrated out of the box. So for those who are going to use this for pro apps work or graphics work, that's a good thing. And there's no PWM. And on ours, there's virtually no light bleed, which is good for an IPS display. The not so good things, the cons, well, you know, this, like I said, seems like a design that's probably going to disappear. It's just something that ASUS came up with to try to deal with the heat problem for these high-performance first-gen thin laptops, and it really needs to go away. The forward-shifted keyboard, you really have to use it on a desk, or it's not ergonomic to type on. Key travel's pretty low, but okay, you're probably going to game with this. Maybe you don't care, but tactility does suffer. That right-mounted trackpad, obviously as a lefty, I'm not totally in love with that, but it's narrow. It's not really very comfortable either. Thermals on this are as compromised as your average very thin and light gaming laptop in terms of CPU and GPU temperatures, that is, and mostly CPU core temperatures. But in terms of casing thermals, the unique design does certainly help because the heat is shifted up above the keyboard and the little drop-down bottom stops your lap from getting too hot. Battery life on this is just meh. I know they want to make it thin and light, but that's kind of like 2 years ago trick, making the battery small so it's thinner and so it's lighter. There's no Thunderbolt 3 for $3,000. I'm a little miffed by this. How about you? And lastly, at this price range, the fact that it has an NVMe SSD, yay, that's good, but it's an X2 rather than X4, a faster kind of SSD, so you get middling performance. It's a mid-range Intel SSD for $3,000. Really? So there you have it. I mean, it's great that ASUS is trying to keep this design alive. I think it serves them better in the 17-inch that we're going to review soon. I'm Lisa from Mobile Tech Review. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more cool tech videos, and thumbs up if you like this vid.